And I now get a little screen, folks, that says I can order the video here and a little button. That's new for me.
Move people around. I think that's only if you don't have hide non-video participants disabled,
right.
something like that.
That's right. I just tried to drag around to play around with that. I forgot about that feature. We are now recording. We will call to order at 9:08 a.m. on February 12th, 2021. This meeting of the joint Easton Reading Region 9 Policy Committee. Members present: Chris Parkin, Maureen Williams, myself, and Stephanie Pearson-Ugal. Gwen Denny not currently present. I think she has a conflict today. The first item is the approval of minutes from our February 5th meeting. Do I have a motion?
I don't think we have minutes. I think that's part of the problem, John.
Yeah.
Is that true? I thought
I did not do them unless they got circulated and I didn't see.
I'm sorry. I thought I saw them distributed. My mistake.
I don't believe they were, because I know that I was asked, did you do them? And I said, I wasn't there. I didn't do them.
Oh, I see. They were draft minutes, I think.
The draft ones that haven't been.
I see. Very good. Okay.
So there are no minutes.
So I don't have a motion. Very good.
No, you do not.
Then we'll move on. Public comment. No members of the public being present. We'll go to committee member comment. Hearing none, we'll move on to our first item on the agenda, which is the GoGuardian and action plan related thereto. I have some updates on some of the privacy and technology research that I was doing, but Stephanie, did you want to start?
Yes, we are in the process of reviewing all of the policies that are currently on the books for all three districts in order to at least compile the group that this committee will need to review in greater detail. I had communication with our legal counsel regarding our current acceptable use policy in the three districts. And the council's recommendation is certainly to review that policy in greater detail and bring it into a more current version, since it hasn't been revised in several years. In terms
of a policy in the future that goes on the list for, at least annual review, because things change so fast. But
right.
I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No, that's okay. There was also some conversation about the contract with GoGuardian. GoGuardian explicitly states in their privacy statement that they are compliant with the Connecticut data privacy law. And so when a vendor makes that, states that explicitly, we actually do not have a separate contract with respect to data privacy. We have an order with them. We don't have an individual contract with them.
So Stephanie, are they paid monthly or annually, or?
I believe they're paid annually, but I could certainly check. In fact, I could probably do it while we're on this meeting, because I think I have the invoice in my email box.
Okay. Anything else on that topic? I can touch on some of the research that I've done.
Not for me, no.
Okay. So I've made a couple of updates to the strategic objectives slide presentation, where we're keeping some things. I'm going to share my screen here. I added, as a part of sort of the to-dos that I was working on for today. So that was a two-part piece. One was looking at the policy that exists inside of the CABE manuals, and the other was looking at other sources, which I looked at various neighboring districts and sort of districts that I thought cut a good sort of cross-section in terms of the approaches that would likely be used. On the CABE front, I actually don't have the password for I think it must have been updated. I went to look, but I think I just missed Sharon yesterday. So when she's back in the office. I'll get that login info and be able to search there. But in the meantime, I went to 5 different sites. So I looked at Westport, Weston, Greenwich, Ridgefield, and Stamford. With the exception of Ridgefield, it's actually quite difficult to even get to the part of the websites where you're seeing policies. So I would say one takeaway that I would say for us is making sure that on our websites that it's really easy to get to the policies and that they're.
I believe CABE has a service where they will host all the policies for you and make them searchable and clickable and all these other things. And I think that's what Ridgefield uses.
Interesting. Well, that would explain a lot.
Yeah, and it's like a couple $1,000s a year. And I said, for a couple $1,000s a year, I can make a Google Doc.
Right. Yes.
Is that also what Westport uses? Because I feel like I've also checked their site and it looks like they really adopted the CABE policies wholesale.
Yeah, there's sort of a CABE hosting thing that when you see the user interface, you just know because it looks a certain way. But
yeah, it probably looks a lot like the CABE sort of browser when you're browsing their policies. Yeah. So I don't know that we necessarily need to go through each one of these in detail, but just to give you a sense of sort of, what we see here. So on the Westport page, for instance, we come to this page and then we can drill into these different categories, look at their sort of policies for staff, look at their the sort of list of programs and things like that. Nothing particularly provocative or revolutionary here. Same thing really with Weston, except we're sort of straight into a PDF document that is their policy manual. I think that's sort of the way that some of these districts solve this is there's here's the link to the policy manual and you can search inside of that. So they've actually made it possible to sort of navigate between their various policies pretty easily. And I think
and it looks from the URL there that was most recently reviewed 2 years ago.
Yep.
So it looks like it's in the typeface that CABE uses.
Yeah. For Greenwich, they actually have more of a portal feel, which I really like. They let me check out the various dimensions of.
Oh wow! Look at that.
Yeah, right.
It even went down
Yeah,
that's cool. Sorry.
Yeah.
I want to know how big their tech department is.
Yeah.
Well, I want to know too, but.
Yeah. I have family who sort of works over there, so we could do some to back the napkin math on what it would take for us to get here.
Yeah, very user friendly.
Yeah, exactly. And that's
for your child's iPhone or iPad, for your child's Android, managing. Wow.
How to set settings, how to,
Yeah. These are things that I, as a user, would actually care about. You're presenting it to me.
I mean, not for nothing. Some of this stuff already exists on Rebecca Richards' website.
Right.
It's just, you've got to it's not all in one place like this.
Right. Yeah.
Greenwich has been one-to-one beginning in kindergarten for several years.
Yep. We also have, if we wanted to get sort of bird's eye view of an administrator, we actually in Easton, one of the principals of the principal of what is it? I think Riverside Elementary in Greenwich is he's right up the street from me. Really good guy. I know him well. Like he'd be happy to give us insights about how this all fits into their daily practices. And then finally, then we have Bridgefield, which was actually quite easy to sort of actually search on their website and find that. And while it's not as elegant as the way that Greenwich presents it, I found this to be very digestible and clear. And I like that they have the sort of policies and procedures here together and that we can sort of see who are the people that I should be connecting with and all of that. And I think that's really helpful for staff. Let's
take a second. They have a director of education technology, a data coordinator, a data specialist, a technology integrator for the high school, a help desk coordinator, a technician, a technician, a technician, a technician.
We're not done.
I still like the part on the left where they break down the policies more or less by concept, and they're not throwing everything into one.
Right. I totally agree with that as well. Yep.
Just for context, Stephanie, Ridgefield is roughly 2x ER9. If you combine the 3 districts?
I would say so. So when I think about the area districts, I think, Weston is roughly the same size as us. Ridgefield is probably the closest comparison in terms of economic status.
It's really interesting. And it's funny because you see, Weston, their approach is, here's a PDF, like here, you'll figure it out. It's all here somewhere. And, then you go to Greenwich and it's like, here you go. Did you need anything else with that?
I'm curious what the correlation is between how much is invested in Weston in people who or in this area, because in Ridgefield, clearly there's a dozen people to do it. In Greenwich, I'm assuming there's a large number of people to do it also, in part because they've been one-to-one for years. I'm going to guess that Weston probably has one or two people wearing multiple hats.
Yes. Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct about that. I know that, Greenwich is a very large district. They have a large and comprehensive technology department. But a part of this also has to do with the leadership. I happen to know some of the individuals who are involved with this work. And so much of it has to do with having the right person in the right role. I worked with someone who was in Ridgefield for many years in New Canaan. And so I know the work, and it just makes me optimistic about what's possible with having some leadership in this area. Yeah. Even though we will not have a comprehensive department, at least it'll be a start.
Right. Last, and a little bit of a different tack I took with Stanford, because I sort of uncovered something that I thought was really interesting. So here, when looking for student data privacy, one of the things that we come across is a list of all of their contracts.
With a list,
sortable,
but it's identifying student info being collected pursuant to that contract.
Yeah,
that's huge.
Yeah, and I'm a little bit.
When you click on one of those, does it bring up the contract?
Yeah.
Wow.
Right.
Sorry for sounding like overly almost enthusiastic, but wow.
Well, I believe ours does that as well.
Yeah, it does. And I think like we post our contracts on there. What I was particularly struck by is the ability to search and filter and sort of having it all here in one table I thought that was really palatable and also, or, sort of easy to digest rather. And that these are all the things tagged to this particular area of interest. I just thought, wow, how are they doing that?
Someone has spent a lot of time thinking this through. That's what.
If you go up a level, sorry, Maureen, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think it's huge that you've that they point out that these are particular possibilities where student information is collected.
Right.
So someone cannot say to you, I didn't know.
Right.
Right. That's all pursuant to the Public Act, and that's something we've been doing.
Right.
Right. So I'm also thinking just as a website organization. So they have this under finance and purchasing.
Right.
On our website, there's a whole separate link for the data privacy law that will take the viewer to the actual act. And then I think a letter from Tom McMorrin. And then there's a link that will show all of our contracts and that are also hyperlinked. So it'll show the vendor, and then you can open it up and see the actual contract, and it will show any kind of restrictions in the use.
Yep. Okay.
And
so this
actually,
is up one level from the contract.
Anytime they want to use something new, we have a process. So they need to check first to see if it's on the approved list. If not on the approved list, then there's a form that needs to be submitted in several steps to get things approved.
Okay. So that, that was a part of sort of coming to understand sort of what are other people doing, how are they presenting the information, and all of that. I think a deeper dive into the actual content of those policies is probably a logical next step. In addition, in our policy, and there should be more in there. Okay. In our policy committee documents folder, where we keep our draft versions of the the policies as we're reviewing them and commenting in preparation for our meetings. I added a new folder for privacy and technology policy research and started to collect. And I think I must have just saved a bunch of them locally, but I've got a number of documents. So, sort of the laws and the privacy task force documents. So there's been some really interesting work done at the state level in this space. So in 2019, there was a task force. I'm just going to open this up quickly. And they focused on 7 core areas, and it's sort of reasonable requests, means of providing notice, et cetera. I'm sorry, 8. And in each one of these 8, they provide guidance, and then they say, hey, there's some other stuff to think about as well that they don't go deeper on. And then they reference inside of that document some work that was done to produce a toolkit in 2017. And I thought there was some really interesting content here as well. So this is good, but they talk about in the 2019 task force document, they also talk about training resources, comprehensive training resources for districts that the state will create and provide so that districts don't have to create it themselves. I wasn't able to easily find those resources. Maybe they're out there and I just wasn't looking in the right place. But I thought that would be really interesting as well to look at the resources that are available. So some work done there and more to follow. So I think anything else on GoGuardian for now, for the time being?
Just a little bit more on the state piece. That there is a bill currently that will push the burden for data privacy to the state, so that we would no longer have to go through the process of negotiating with each vendor, potentially getting our attorney involved to execute a contract, but the state would have the requirement of doing that.
That's interesting because as I was looking at those, the 2019 task force and sort of drilling in and trying to find the training resources, apparently there are only 3 contracts that the state has gone to negotiate. One with Apple, one with Google, and one with Code.org.
Code.org, yeah.
Yeah. And I just thought that's like, I get the Google one, I get the Apple one. I don't know how Code.org showed up on there because I would put Scratch on there. I would put, there are many other things that I think people would go to first, Code.org, but I don't know. Okay.
Right. So when the law first was put into place, there was such pressure from districts across the state to say, we can't possibly manage this. We need your help. And frankly, it's crazy for each district and many districts using the same law firm to pay the attorney to do redundant work. What can the state do to support us? So they took on a few of the biggies, and then it sort of stalled. And at that point, it was pushed off to the districts to continue the work.
That's interesting background. Wow.
But I will say that the person who's involved with the Connecticut Education Technology Commission, whatever it's called, and his name is escaping me right this second, Doug, I believe, Doug Casey. He is really such an advocate for all of us. He works tremendously hard on behalf of districts and technology leaders. So he runs the listserv for tech directors, and I participate in that listserv. And so a lot of times when there's sort of a big question, for instance, New York Times is a vendor that has absolutely refused to comply with the Connecticut data privacy terms. And sometimes the reasoning from the vendor is that they're not intended to be an educational product, so they won't even consider entering into an agreement. He stays with it, and sometimes on our behalf, he works with these companies for years until ultimately they'll come to an agreement that will slightly change the use of the product, or even just get them to agree to our Connecticut terms. And so most recently, he was able to get New York Times to agree. And that makes a big difference, especially at the high school level for us.
That's great.
But that organization is tremendously helpful.
I wonder if, especially if we think that, as a part of the work that we're doing here or in the sort of policies in general, if it makes sense for us to think about a work stream that is sort of looping back with those types of organizations to say, hey, we've been really, sort of seriously engaged in this kind of work for some time. And we would love to, pick your brain or, sort of here are our findings, tell us where we're off base, like how, even just review our summary of, some of the stuff that we're doing and, tell us if we're stepping in anything.
Yeah, I can certainly I can send him an individual email. He's very responsive. Or if there's a larger topic that you would like him to address, he might be willing to come to one of our meetings.
That'd be great. Get a guest.
That'd be great.
Yeah, a guest speaker.
Hey, education for us too.
We could cross post on his YouTube channel. I don't know. All right. Very good. Anything else on Go Guardian and our action plan there? Actually, sorry, before we leave that, we should probably just make sure that we have some next steps because we certainly haven't finished everything.
I did check on the order. It's an annual purchase.
Okay.
It's roughly $7,500 for the teacher level version and $7,500 for the administrator level. And that's for all 3 districts.
Okay.
So you combine that, so the total price point is 15?
Correct. Spread across the 3, and the renewal date is July.
Thank you.
Okay.
And that's the sort of thing where none of the 3 districts could realistically remove it from their budget because it would throw the whole thing out of whack. I'm just getting to this question of whether that should be a central office budget item. Just from a housekeeping perspective. And that's something we can talk with Clarence about going into next year. I think we can make some of those adjustments and try to create additional transparency so we're not burying this across 5 schools' budgets, basically.
Okay. I think for next week, we have some items. Okay. Subject matter experts from Go Guardian and perhaps other directors of technology.
I don't know how you covered that last week, or
I think, yeah, it's here. I'll share my screen just so we're all looking at the same thing. So this was our sort of rough tracker. I'm actually going to put this into a Google Sheet and just kind of have them all on there to sort of improve our ability to go through not just Go Guardian, but anything else that we have on our list. So I think we pushed this till next Friday to say just sort of hearing from Go Guardian or getting some promotional materials from them or anything in that space or possibly connecting with directors of technology who could help us better understand pitfalls and common missteps. But I mean, we can revise that action step if we think there's sort of a better use of our time and energy on that.
I've gotten some information back from other districts. I think that many districts are, I wouldn't say struggling, but are finding a need to review use and practice in this year because of remote teaching and learning. The fact that kids are at home and that really changes so much of what we do, and especially thinking about filtering and monitoring in particular. So, if we believe that remote learning is not something that's going to go away this June, I think we certainly need to take a closer look at the policies that guide that.
Okay. And then I think for the 26th, we were shooting for understanding the core capabilities of the platform versus competing platforms. Does that seem realistic? Is that like, I don't want us to be sort of creating work for ourselves just for the sake of that. I mean, what do we think?
I mean, I can ask Amy and Russell to put together a table that shows, so the three products that I've seen used in Connecticut are Securely, iBoss, and GoGuardian. Those are the three that I know of. I can ask him to do a comparison of those three.
Is it iBoss?
iBoss. Oh, I just the letter I.
Of course.
But I think John's name is more apt, actually.
Yeah.
And is Securely spelled?
Yeah, SECURELY.
We've reached the spelling bee portion of the meeting.
That's right. Well, especially with company names, like
it could be anything.
Yeah. And then GoGuardian is the other.
And then GoGuardian.
Okay.
Brought to you by The Weekend. That's
right. Securely, iBoss, GoGuardian. Okay. All right, good. Okay. Maybe we take a half step back and just sort of revisit what is our ultimate goal here, right? Like what are we actually trying to achieve with our sort of exploration of the GoGuardian topic? I can take a swing at it, but anyone else who thinks they have a good hold on it, feel free.
Go ahead.
Okay. I think it's to understand the risks that we might be introducing by use of this, whether or not we can mitigate those risks effectively by establishing the right sort of procedures, protocols, et cetera, right people in place and all of that. And if we think that would be too much of a drain because of sort of what requirements might be attached to those policies and procedures, then the consideration of other software to achieve the core purpose of GoGuardian, as opposed to some of the sort of tangential, like the stuff it can also do that we think could be interesting that actually presents a lot of the risk.
Right. I think it's a step for us to see transparency issues in what we disclose to the members of the public about the procedures and policies in place, because it certainly isn't transparent enough to me. And our disclosures, which are somewhat older for lots of other reasons, this is the tipping point. This is the thing that says, wow, if we're thinking about GoGuardian and those disclosures together, we're really illustrating why and how they're not up to date.
Like that.
I think from even a higher level, we're talking about what are our technology use and data privacy policies? What do they need to be? And from a legal perspective, and what do they need to be from the perspective of a district that has aspirations of being a one-to-one district that might have a fluidity of use of devices at home and in district, and what the impact is on our operations of such a shift. Because that's where we get into the friction of, I'm okay with a lot of this stuff on a school device in the school building, subject to certain disclosures. I may not be okay with the same thing if it's in my kid's bedroom, basically.
Mm-hmm. Or without a very clear understanding that I, as a parent, could also be subject to this in unknowing ways.
Right.
And that's where the whole remote learning thing has brought this all to a head in a way that,
Yes.
Previously it was far less of a pressing concern.
It was less obvious, I think, but it was still, I think, a concern. I mean, I think that we started this exploration in part because some high school kids told me, like, hey, you look at this, you see what it does, and like, I didn't look at that. Let me dig in and yeah.
I think that the remote learning has surfaced a lot of issues, operational and instructional, that for a lot of folks from a family perspective, it was a lot of set it and forget it. It was kid goes to school, is a black box for 7 hours, comes back, assume everything is fine. When some of those standard practices and procedures start appearing in the dining room and parents start saying, wait a second, what is this? Oh, we do this all the time. That's where all these questions start getting surfaced. And it's important that we understand from a policy perspective what it is that we're comfortable with and how we're communicating that, so that everybody understands sort of what the ground rules are. And that's from students to families to teachers to administrators, because I think there are probably a wide range of teacher interpretations of some of what these expectations are too.
Yeah, I think that's
There's just a wide range of competencies in terms of understanding the information that's being presented too.
Right. It's not an indictment so much as a need for clarifying education, basically.
Absolutely not an indictment. No.
Yeah.
No.
But,
There's only
it's
so
important
much
to make that
data.
clear, because I know a lot of people are always looking for somebody
Yes.
to point a finger at.
right.
Yes.
John, this document is in the shared folder, isn't it?
It's in yeah, I actually moved it into our policy committee docs folder so that
Okay.
we can all get to it easily.
I'm a fan of to-do lists.
Me too. Okay. Is there anything else that we would say is a sort of core part of what we're trying to do with this? So sort of define our policies related to technology use and privacy, and achieve true transparency and disclosure, right? In our disclosures.
In our disclosures.
Does that work?
Yep.
And then identify sort of any risks or concerns that we have with the current way that we're doing this and mitigate them, or, look at alternative, alternate solutions.
And I think maybe a timing target is to be comfortable that our work is complete and we can give a thorough report back to the regularly scheduled May tri-board.
Yeah, agreed. Which I would say we should try to have this, well in hand by mid-April.
I would say, the goal from this group should be to be done before that, but giving us a runway and and sort of being able to signpost to colleagues what the expectations are is helpful.
The only other thing that comes to mind when we're talking about goals has to do with sort of the educational goals that are associated with our use of these products. And I don't know that that needs to live in a policy, but that's what I think of too. What are we trying to achieve through our use of these products?
Yep. Yeah, agreed. Let's. I would actually put that first. Like, what is
educational goal, really?
Yeah.
Or instructional goal. It's because that gets at the really big picture question of why are we ever making the choice to use technology in the classroom, and what is the educational benefit of it, period. It's not just a toy. How are we integrating it in a real way? And
whose benefit is really derived here, right? I mean, ultimately, it's a student-centric question and not, yes, you want to provide it on both educator and student level, but that should be informed by a student-centric perspective.
Good. Okay. Very good. Okay, this is helpful. So
it
I
will
think
be our own masterclass in how to do this.
Yeah, right. So we have some to-dos. I think next week, I know we want to save a little bit of time to dig in on some of the language related to social media and whether or not we want to advance that to the boards. I think the like what I would consider the next step for us is we have some stuff that we're going to talk about next week, but digging into the goals and saying, well, what do we need to do to achieve each one of these goals? Can we actually articulate each one of, where we have a question, can we articulate an answer now? And if so, great, let's do that. And if not, let's, just make the additional to-dos in our list to go out and figure that out. Okay, great. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So that takes us to, I think we have the 3000 series, which I think will moving past. I think for tri-board governance, actually, before we leave the tri-board governance, we do have some to-dos that we should probably discuss, because I think we also have a goal of getting to the May meeting to actually suggest some of that. And I think we had talked about doing some evening sessions, perhaps, to create as inclusive an environment for all the board members who may not be able to make a morning meeting. So I'm just looking through here. I don't think I have a list for that body of work. So I think we may want to just copy one of these guys. Okay, I'll share my screen again. Okay, so we'll call this tri-board governance. Okay, and then we should be able to, I would suggest that we try to start with this.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about our goals.
Achieve a common understanding of how the how tri-board governance works. Or how and why.
Yeah, I would say it would be helpful to start with the why.
Yeah.
Why is this something that, I mean, so, sort of the view of each individual board as a separate entity with its own set of goals and processes and then in terms of the tri-board piece, what are you trying to achieve by having any discussion about common governance?
Okay. And is there anything specific in terms of the how it works? I could imagine a set of sub bullets here.
Yeah,
I don't
think
know
that
if this is
there's
entirely
resolution.
relevant. Oh, John here, but part of the tensions seem to come from the fact that the ER9 board is a board of finance, and the Reading board and the Easton board are not both boards of finance, and a lot of the stress and structural issues seem to arise out of that to me. People are always cognizant of numerical pressures in a different way. At least that's my experience, and it may not be others, but it's mine.
Okay.
I don't know that falls under goals. I just think that if you take that as a sentiment, it may inform where things go and why people dig down on particular positions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that part of it is that none of the three boards have any kind of formal or informal onboarding procedures for
That too.
for indoctrinating new board members into how to be a board member. And the result is that the gravitational pull of the dominant caucus in each of the three boards sets the tone for new board members and what their expectations are, and creates a culture that starts drifting apart depending on sort of when certain people came on board and who were sort of the dominant voices in what the expectation should be, if any. And some people I still think have been on boards for years and still don't totally understand where they're going.
I think that you see that in every board, though, Chris.
Oh,
that's not unique.
I agree
to this.
100%. But I think that that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be looking at a way to make sure that we onboard people in an effective manner.
I would also say there's a special dimension to our board member orientation that is an understanding of the tri-board structure, which is quite difficult to do when we haven't defined exactly how all of that works. So it's like, here's how this works. And it's like, but I just saw that work differently. It's like, yeah, this time it worked differently.
But
yeah. Right.
But I'm on the other side of the issue this time, so it works this way.
Right. Right.
So
But you ultimately want fluidity right here more than in any other policy area, at least to me. You want some ability to grow and morph. And other policies you may want more specificity. And I hear in some ways you want less.
But I think you want to have a common understanding of the why, like why are we meeting together? And to me,
Correct.
the purpose of meeting together is because it drives efficiency across the municipalities to be sharing certain resources and to be working collaboratively. And it provides better student outcomes to have a cohesive K-12 conversation in
Correct.
certain areas. The second area I think is important for sort of how governance works is you've got your question of meeting governance itself. How are we conducting meetings? And within that is sort of the dispute resolution concept. The second is over what areas of operations do the tribe boards have jurisdiction versus the individual boards, because that creates a distinction. And that is, for example, who do they have a say in hiring trilaterally, and who do they not have a say in hiring or negotiating with trilaterally, and sort of what authority is delegated in what direction and to whom, and also what trilateral committees exist and for what purpose.
We have just made this a very big topic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So easy. Target
Yes.
date next week. Also, but I think there's definitely an appetite for it. I think the majority of people want to know answers to these things, not that they necessarily, not that the answers will come easily, and not that we're all necessarily going to agree right away. Like it may be that we say this is a topic where there are 2 views or 3 views, and anytime we come to that topic, like we shouldn't feel like we have to solve all of the questions that could emerge. We should feel fine saying there are some things where we know that there are 2 different views, and we're just going to articulate those clearly so that when we come to this topic again, we're not figuring out what the 2 views are. We can just say, here are the 2 things that have been presented before.
Fair.
I think we can advance the ball significantly just by coming to a situation where we say, all 21 board members agree this is why we're meeting together.
Right.
And all 21 board members can agree that this is the manner in which meetings operate. Like that itself would be a substantial milestone, because at least everyone can say we've done something together to start articulating these things. And then you can grow off of that as things emerge. Because I think, to both of your comments, it's going to be very difficult to get everybody around to a really meaty agreement on lots of different terms. But if we start with the real nuts and bolts of this that should not be particularly controversial, it'll make everybody feel like they're able to do something and able to start moving things forward.
Right. So what are those areas that you think would be best for a more meaty discussion? I mean, I think meeting conduct is the easiest of the things that's been articulated, right? The following rules shall apply to tri-board meetings. Right. And tiebreakers are within that.
Yeah. Because that falls into the category of, I think most people don't care what the rules are as long as there are rules that they can look back on.
Right. And I do have, we can't keep falling back on institutional knowledge for the rules.
Right.
Because that doesn't serve the organizational purpose at all.
Right. So define meeting protocols. I think, can we just carve out like what are the various protocols? So that I think one is going to be, and I think we do actually have this defined somewhere.
So I've got, from what I wrote out just sort of off the top of my head in June, meetings of the 3 boards meeting jointly shall be chaired in annual rotation set to the calendar year, rotating between the 3 boards. Motions must be made and carried by all 3 boards separately. Tri-board meetings are 3 boards meeting jointly. Then I have a brief definition of the mechanism. The purpose of joint meetings, doesn't get into that. Yeah, I mean, one of the questions is, if 1 or 2 out of the 3 boards make a motion for discussion and the other 1 or 2 refuses to make the same motion, what results? Because that just creates tension for the sake of tension.
It
And
does
looking
create
back,
tension, but as a practical matter, it also provides a forum for resolution. I think, we may be case in point of that the other day, right? Sometimes you have to give different people, for different reasons, different forums to resolve things. And sometimes a tri-board meeting is not going to get you
well, what I'm saying is, if Easton and Reading put a motion on the table to, approve this policy, and then Region 9 doesn't put the motion on at all, now we have this sort of awkward moment where there's 2/3 discussion and 1/3 not discussion, and then we have a disagreement about why we're not having a conversation.
I think you can have that be solved by timing. If each board thinks that something else has to be dealt with by all boards, then there's a time frame within which that the other board has to deal with it, whatever it is, right? I just think you also need to leave room for ideas to expand and consensus to be reached. And sometimes it's not just in that tri-board meeting.
I think that's true, but I think for us to define sort of some of those channels and sort of build the flow chart, if you will, on motions moved by one of the three boards, motions moved by two of the three boards, like what are the options? Like what?
Right.
And
Right.
just for us to
What
lay that
result?
out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, because looking back at minutes for 20 years, there have been opportunities where two of the three boards wanted to add an agenda item, and that forced the third board to add the agenda item under the mechanism. Other times, one board wanted to do it, and the other two didn't, so they didn't get to do it, and then they fought about it. And it's just sort of, let's decide what it is or what it isn't.
The mechanism.
Yep.
That's
I think the
institutional
first three
knowledge.
bullets are very straightforward. I mean, I don't think anyone's going to take issue with that. Dispute resolution is really the biggest topic here.
Yeah,
And,
right.
and to some extent, this also gets into sort of representation on joint committees when there's some decision-making at hand.
That's a good point too. I mean, for joint committees, it feels like it's more straightforward. It's the majority of the members of the joint committee. I think a part of forming a joint committee are each of the boards agreeing that on this subject, if we want to move things through this committee, if this committee is going to recommend something to each of the boards, it's going to be done with this new entity that is a combination of the three boards. I think joint committees like this one and some of the others that we have are it's a really good way for us to demonstrate a way for the three boards to work together.
Right, but in terms of the representation, if the representation is always two members from Region 9, one member from Easton,
Oh
one
yeah.
member from
I'm
Reading, that's the other piece of this.
I'm not a fan of that. It seems like we should just all have two members if we're going to have two members from Region 9, but that's something that
I guess that's why I was just thinking how it connects to dispute resolution. So it, with the voting and it would be worth discussing.
Yeah.
And not for nothing, I don't think it's articulated anywhere because I don't think anybody's ever raised this question, but to the extent that Region 9 at its core has weighted voting, we've never discussed the extent to which weighted voting trickles down to jointly meeting committees. I don't think it ought to, but if some stickler somewhere wanted to create that concern on a committee that had an Easton vote, a Reading vote, and then a Region 9 Easton and a Region 9 Reading, and it split 2-2, theoretically, the Reading's weighted vote would beat the Easton weighted vote based on the current proportions.
Right.
I mean, I'm just trying to issue spot where somebody might cause a problem.
Yeah. Okay.
That's a tension, though, and maybe I'm thinking this through differently, that you just resolved by virtue of the fact that you consider that you have an Easton and Reading, right? So you don't necessarily weight the vote by the population of the students in the schools at the time. Or is there something that I'm misunderstanding?
Well, I'm just saying that on Region 9, your vote is weighted in the event of a tie.
Right.
And so when the Region 9 members are on a committee, are their votes weighted?
All right.
Weighted
I don't
based
know
on
that
the
that's ever come up, or at least in my experience, it hasn't come
Right.
up. I think that answer, or at least among the Region 9 members, is going to be informed in certain contexts by the fact that they are also a Board of Finance. Again, so that the predominant idea is going to be, part of this is that our internal governance structure is not only policy and practice, it's numbers. And so I think you're gonna hear an awful lot of pushback.
But I mean, if a committee per se has no authority except to recommend,
Correct.
why would it need its votes to be weighted?
So, but so imagine that we have so let's imagine Gwen's here as well.
Mhm.
And we're talking about recommending moving forward this tri-board governance policy that we're coming up with. And Maureen and I say no, and you and Gwen say yes, you win if weighting.
By weighted votes, it carries, right?
Yeah,
But by non-weighted votes, it fails.
that's fascinating.
Right now, but in
Articulate for
5
me
years,
the-
the result
But
will be
next
different.
year we win.
Right, exactly.
And actually, if you're going to carry the weightings, you can't just do it for the Region 9 members. You do it for all members. So really, we all need to actually be weighted based on our student populations.
Population, right.
So Maureen and Gwen are weighted based on the high school population. You and I are weighted based on our elementary school populations, which I think are elementary and middle school populations, which I think I win.
It goes to you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're still at a deadlock.
There's a rounding error
Has this at
somewhere.
a
Can we
committee
agree-
level ever been an issue, though? I mean, as a practical matter, at a committee
We go back
level?
to the first bullet, which says efficiency. I think that conversation really
Can we all agree never to mention this conversation to Rydell?
is why we never move forward.
No, this is why, because you have policy wonks in this meeting, Stephanie, who really like to think about these things.
Yeah.
And so their brains all get activated. Oh, look at that, look at that, look at that.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that energy.
You just want us to focus on execution, not on theory. We get it. We get it. Point
Understood.
taken.
And yeah, understood. Okay. I noticed the time got away from us there a little bit with our.
We were having too much
But Maureen,
fun.
you asked a practical question, which has this ever really been an issue?
Right.
And I would say in the back and forth that we've had over the years about negotiations
Right.
and salaries, that's the group.
That's the
Because
forum.
process
Right.
has
I've
been
seen that.
built differently under different superintendents. And whether it's board chairs or committee or superintendent recommendation, I think that's the one that
The one
has-
place where it's an issue. Right. I've certainly seen that. So I get it.
Okay.
I don't think it would hurt in the tri-board governance context to, in one clause with respect to tri-board committees, say, all committee members shall have an equal vote. Or not say that, but to resolve the issue one way or the other so that it doesn't become some nonsense.
Okay.
Folks, just letting you know that I have about 2 minutes before I
Yeah,
have to go.
Yep. So I'll stop the share. I know we have
Can I just go back though to what Chris just said? If all committee members have an equal vote, but you don't have equal representation on the committee,
right.
then the additional votes are going to weight the vote.
Right. And
Yeah.
I think that we have to address, I think that's a slightly separate topic about whether or not we increase representation from Easton and Reading or otherwise make adjustments.
Yep.
Mhm.
Okay. So I know we don't have time to go through the other agenda items. I would propose that we move up social media policy to next week. So it's the beginning of the conversation. So we make sure to get to it. I don't think that there's a sort of super urgent push on that. I don't think any of us are planning to meet again soon to dive into a first reading of that, but let's get to it next week. Okay.
Do you want me to follow up to invite a special guest to next week's meeting?
Yes, please. I think that would be useful.
Okay.
Good. So that takes us to public comment. No members of the public being present. We'll go to committee member comment.
My comment is I move to adjourn.
Do I have a
Second.
second? Very good. All in favor? And we are adjourned at 10:03 a.m.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Maureen.
Bye.
Thank you, Stephanie.